not sure how much any of you know about me. I got into real estate almost 20 years ago through real estate appraisal work. So I used to do reports for banks to mitigate risk and mitigate mortgage. So when somebody bought a house or somebody wanted to take equity out of a house, I would go in and do an analysis of the neighborhood and the real estate, prepare a report and send it off to the mortgage lender. And they would lend based on my report. So that's how I got my introduction to real estate. I managed to get into that field because I went to school for architecture. So I went to school for architectural technology and design, and then fell into that field when I was working on Bay Street. And at one point, about 11 years ago, Trump decided they were going to lock down on people using their data. So the only way to continue as an appraiser was to get your real estate license, which I did. And from there, once people found out that I had a real estate license, it just kind of spiraled into a real estate career, which made me happier, and it's a lot easier work. So my background in analysis and in construction and in project management and consultation originally came from a very analytical perspective where there was no personality, it was just nuts and bolts, and the numbers either make sense or the numbers didn't make sense. And from there, it kind of helped as much as hindered, but I'll explain why in a second. So that's how I ended up here. 5 years ago, I made the decision to walk away from appraisals and focus strictly on building a real estate career. And through the years, I've had the benefit and the luxury of working with different types of investors on different scales. From builders looking for vacant lots to professional investors looking for medium to large residential units, small scale people, first-time home buyers who weren't willing to go into a condo and work their way up, at which point a duplex seems to make a lot of sense. They can offset their mortgage with some income. So I've dabbled in a whole bunch of it, and recently I've come across in the last 5 years a gentleman I went to high school with, and he wants very easy to maintain, no headaches kind of investments, and he found that condos were perfect for him. So I've become more aware and more informed in that area as well. So those are really the big 4 areas that I want to talk about today. Obviously, the condo aspect of investing is a much bigger component than it was 20 years ago when all of this area, all of that area was a golf course.
Okay.
So the first thing is large-scale multi-unit residential, and there's a few things that are really important to know when you're having a conversation with an investor who's telling you that they've got the $3 million and they want 12 units, and it's within the realm of what they're able to manage because they're going to have a property manager and everything will be easy. 7 units or greater changes the tax bracket. It also affects the bottom line. So when you're dealing with a large multi-unit residential property where you've got 7 units or more, your property tax almost doubles in some cases. Evicting tenants or requesting the removal of tenants is not an option. So the rental tribunal, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, changed it last year to anything with 4 units or more, you're not allowed to ask for an N11.
Correct.
So anything up to 3 units, so converted house, with 2 units in a basement or 3 units in total, you can still ask for an N11 as part of the offer or agreement of purchase and sale. 4 or more, you have to assume the tenants, unless there's an offer on the table for those tenants to be removed. Residential mortgage rates do not apply. So the reason I say that is you can go online and check any mortgage website. Big banks, mortgage brokers, private lenders, and equity lenders do not post commercial rates. And the reason they don't post commercial rates is because commercial rates are completely contingent on the deal. So if they don't like the numbers, or if they don't like the property, or if they don't like the neighborhood, they can change the rate, and they could also change the down payment. So the best way to cover your clients' butt in that circumstance is to get in a longer condition within the offer where they have the right to approve or qualify for a mortgage at a rate rate that they find reasonable, and make sure that they're aware that it could be as much as a 40% down payment on a large residential property with multiple units. Calculating the strengths of an investment. So this is the appraiser in me, turned investor consultant. There's two ways of doing it. The first is the gross income multiplier, which, depending on how often you do this, you probably remember from your real estate courses. It's a rough measure of the value of an investment property that is obtained by dividing the property's sale price by its gross annual rent. So quite easily, it's the sale price or the possible sale price divided by the expenses. Now, the one thing that you're going to find is that the expenses listed on an MLS listing are often misrepresented. You're going to want to go through and look at things. I call it normalizing. So you're going to want to normalize your expenses. So have a checklist of things that you're going to look for. It's not hard to find. And make sure that everything on your checklist is accounted for in every property that you're considering an offer on. So if common area hydro is not on your checklist, that's got to be there. Property taxes, any additional parking expenses, maintenance for the property. Maintenance for the property, depending on the units, is probably about $250 per unit per year. It can go up, it can go down depending on the age of the building and the level of maintenance that you see. But all of those things should be accounted for and then divided by ideally the sale price. So with the gross income multiplier, you want to look at a certain range to make lenders happy. Often the list price is a little bit aggressive in that department. So account for the list price divided by the expenses. And then based on your range, work backwards and figure out what a reasonable offer would be. And at that point, you've got a stronger offer to present to a potential mortgage lender, which helps with your down payment, and it also helps with your interest rates. The other thing to account for is increase in expenses and vacancies. Both of those you want as current as possible. So if you're putting an offer on a property in 2019, make sure that the expenses provided are 2016, 2017. Depending on how things have changed and what upkeep or maintenance has been done in the building, it can significantly affect the final outcome of your gross income multipliers. Cap rates is the capitalization rate, shows the potential rate of return on the real estate investment. Again, it's one of those things that they teach you about in commercial real estate school. When you're doing the courses to get your license, it is something, if you're looking at large-scale investments, that mortgage lenders will look at to determine the interest rates and the down payment. The big one that I see a lot with large-scale investments of 6 units or greater is they will advertise the potential market rent of a property. And it's great to understand where it could be. The downside to potential market rent is that no lender will lend on it. So if you've got, Parkdale's a classic example, if you've got a 10-plex in Parkdale and you've got 6 or 7 of your tenants that have been there since 1972 and they're paying $800 a month, it doesn't matter that the unit's worth $2,300 a month now. It means that you're stuck trying to figure out how to carry this mortgage with 7 units at $800 each, and the math just won't work out. So you're going to run into walls, not really fences, walls, with your mortgage lender, and as much as you say potential, they'll tell you the numbers don't make sense.
David, I noticed that the sale price still typically reflects the potential.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the difficulty too with lender and purchaser, right?
Right, and so what I do in those situations where everything is geared toward potential, it's going to happen one of two ways. I personally add that listing to my favorites. So I don't know if you've, on Treb, there's a column on the left-hand side, there's a little yellow star, you can click the star. You can track it, and you can get to 100, 120 days, and then you'll see it either expire or terminate. Check a week later. In all likelihood, it's come up at a lower price, right? And just watch, because reality is most agents who are aware or know what they're doing, know that they're hoping for somebody to come in who's maybe uninformed or not working with a good agent looking to protect their buyer's needs. And they might get that fish in a barrel, and you never know, but realistically, they're going to try and test the waters and then probably come back down to a reasonable number on the next or the third listing. Yeah.
Would you go in and start negotiating based on, like, let's say this is the perfect property, overpriced, your calculations, so you'd go in and start negotiating based on, okay, reasonably we're talking here, blah, 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 would you consider this number?
And I have. It honestly depends on my first conversation with the agent. I was trying to put a deal together on a plaza in Georgetown back in the fall. And I called the agent and I said, we like the plaza, we like the rents, we like the location. The price is a little ambitious. In order to get down to a 5.5% cap rate, we've got to be at this number. And he went, you're bang on. Put something on paper and we'll figure it out. Now, it was probably about $450,000 under list on about 2.3 million. So it was significant, but the agent was informed, the agent knew what he was doing, and his client said, look, it's an estate. At 2.1, we get 700 each, and that makes us happy. And he said, you're not going to get 2.1, and you're not going to get 700 each, but we can try. And he just kept running into the same conversations. I happened to call with a reasonable approach to value, and we got to the point where the number made sense, but for other reasons it fell apart. Yes, but you also run into agents, and this happens in every aspect of real estate, where they may not be as open to a conversation or as knowledgeable as you are with regard to numbers, and you can't fix stupid. So, it depends on, have that conversation and try, and if it works, great, you found a great agent, get the deal done, send them to arrest and bring them into the office. If it doesn't work, then you move on to the next one. There's no shortage of large-scale investment opportunities out there.
How about if you, would you list the property? Like not being a buyer's broker, but
as a listing agent?
Yeah, a listing agent. Is it too difficult for a residential agent to take something like that on?
No. I don't think, it's real estate's real estate. You've got to be prepared for different questions. And depending on who you're getting, you can either defer those questions to a more qualified expert if it had to do with accounting or environmental or development. But in terms of listing it, it's the same as anything else. My biggest concern with listing a large-scale investment property of any kind is that you want to make sure you're dealing with the right seller who is prepared to consider a reasonable number, as opposed to that seller who's looking to capitalize on an estate where it sits too long. And the same as in residential. You don't want your name tied to a listing that isn't reasonably priced and with a seller that isn't open to market data and reasonable and finding a win-win situation. So there's both sides of it. In terms of difficulty, no, it's not difficult. It's just a matter of having the right team around you and making sure that you're asking the right questions. And doing your due diligence and understanding how to break down the sales that are around it to determine your sale price. In Toronto, an ambitious cap is pretty low. You're not going to get a huge cap rate. You might get 3.5%, 4% maybe on.
Depends where it is.
Yeah, but if you go out to Georgetown, Orangeville, Brampton, you go to the outskirts of the city, and you can still get a 5.5%, 6% cap. Yeah. And with a 5.5% or 6% cap, you're getting a good return, you're getting a good mortgage value, and your down payment can sometimes float around 25% with the right lenders. So investment in Toronto is a little bit more stable in that you're going to have tenants and you're going to have a long lineup. But if you've got a plaza, or in this case, multi-unit residential, as same buyer who fell apart in Georgetown was looking at another property in Oshawa, 21 units, it was $2 million. And at 21 units and $2 million, if we worked it out that if 3 units were vacant simultaneously, the property still carried. So when you get into situations like that, it's a lot easier to present to somebody knowing that at $2 million, even if three of their units vacate simultaneously, the property's still going to be able to maintain itself. So, you know, work your numbers out in detail. Figure out what your mortgage amounts are going to be and what your mortgage payments are going to be and your expenses, and then ask them what they're prepared to take on. Property maintenance in Oshawa is 5%. So, you know, you're going to want to make sure that that's part of your cap rate and that's part of your gross income multiplier. Timing and details. Make sure that they're pre-approved. So put them in touch with a mortgage broker, put them in touch with somebody who's going to provide financing. With deals like this, oh, don't worry, I've already talked to somebody, doesn't usually fly with me all that well. And have them introduce you to the mortgage broker, because they may say the mortgage broker needs a week, and the mortgage broker may actually need 3 to 4. So your conditions have to be determined and written in such a way that the mortgage broker can do their job and make sure that your clients aren't wasting your time. If all units have not been seen, which is not uncommon, if you go into 8 to 12 units, they usually show you one of each style of unit. Make sure that there's a condition in the offer to access each unit on one visit at some time during the condition period. If pests have been or are an issue, request a record of remediation. So there are multiple websites throughout the GTA in Southern Ontario where you can find out whether there's bed bugs. Wood ants and termites are a little bit harder, but the information is still available. You know, if you go to some rental sites, you can usually find out if there's been mice or rat infestations and how well they've been dealt with. So going to 8 units shouldn't be that scary. There's more than enough online that you can find the information that you need. And always add a due diligence clause or due diligence conditions, so the lender, accountant, and lawyer can adequately review the numbers and the offer and the documents to make sure that even if you are as great as I think you are at your job, somebody else always might have a second opinion. Give them the chance to review the documents as well. Scaling it down a little bit, you're going to find a lot more of these in Toronto are small-scale multi-unit residential investments. The nice thing about these is that taxes are usually residential taxes. So with 7 or 8 units, you may be paying $12,000. With something like this, it might only cost $6,000, which helps your bottom line. There's more flexibility in requesting vacant possession, again with 3 or fewer units. And there is greater flexibility with down payment and with mortgage rates. So they're not a bad investment. It does provide you real estate in Toronto, which is nice. If you've got a family, the benefit to having something like this is obviously, you've got a place for your kids to live down the road. They can occupy one of the 3 units at some point in their lives, and that will help them along the way. But the reality is they're very marketable, especially with the transition to buyers getting together to pool their resources in order to get into a multi-unit residential property where they each have stake in the game, and they can find living a little more affordable. So unlike large-scale investments, the gross income multipliers and the cap rates are not as strong an indicator for smaller multi-residential properties, primarily in Toronto. It's largely due to the cost of the real estate. So when you've got 3 units trading at $2,000 each for the sake of argument, you've got $6,000 in rent. The property is likely going to be significantly more. So it may not carry, but what it may do is offer an opportunity into real estate where it softens the burden of the mortgage, but there's still an expense to the buyer on a month-to-month basis. So it depends really on who you're selling it to and what you're selling it for. Finding a good, well-maintained 3-unit property that will carry in downtown Toronto is extremely difficult. That doesn't make it a bad investment, especially if it's going to be owner-occupied. It just means that the cost of the real estate is so high downtown that finding 3 rents to offset the entire cost of the property is unlikely. The tips and tricks I use when dealing with smaller scale investment properties in Toronto is know the cost of borrowing $100,000. So every few weeks, just go into TD Canada Trust or whatever bank you use, plug $100,000 into your mortgage calculator at a 5-year fixed variable rate for 25 years, and as of today, it's $497. So when you're talking with someone and you're on the front lawn and they're saying, okay, so what is this going to cost me? Well, if you've got an $800,000 mortgage, it's going to cost you $4,000 a month. Plus your property taxes are $3,600. It's going to cost you another we're at $4,300 a month. Your maintenance is going to be $300 per unit. You're looking at another $1,000 a month. You know, you're looking at $5,000 a month to carry the property. It's going to cost you 1.2. Your end is X. So be able to simplify and break everything down on a cost per month basis. That way you're not dealing with huge numbers that overwhelm them. It makes it a little easier to swallow, and they may be able to get their head around it easier that way. So the second point was calculated cost, which we just did. So you got mortgage, taxes, and expenses. Subtract it from the sale price minus the down payment. Confirm your client's comfort level. So everyone is under the impression there's a lineup at every unit in Toronto the minute somebody moves out. And the reality is that that's not always the case. Sometimes you're going to have to paint kitchen or bathroom repairs. It's not always left in the best of condition. You may have a 2 or 3 week window that you need just to bring in an exceptional contractor to get everything ready for the first of the month for the next tenant to move in, which means your tenants or your clients may be looking at a window where they may not have a tenant, depending on the level of renovation, for 1 to 2 months. Prepare them for that. Ideally, yes, you're not going to have a vacant day. Realistically, you might have a few. If you've got a main floor unit with parking and a back deck, and you're getting $3,500 a month, and that is subtracted from the equation, are you comfortable? And do you have the money to cover that cost? And what you'll often find is that you're going to get a reaction of, yeah, that won't be a problem for 3 to 4 months, or no, if that happens for more than 10 days, you know, we're in a bind. In which case you should probably scale your investment accordingly. New development. New development is fun. And I say new development and infill. There's 3 different facets of this type of investment.
Sorry, David, what is infill?
Infill is where you completely remove the existing dwelling and re-pour a new foundation,
It's called infill.
new footings, and rebuild the entire structure from the footings up. I consider a rebuild. Leaside is a classic example where a lot of the houses in Leaside are rebuilt because the setbacks on the original houses are so close to the property lines that the minute you remove the foundations, the setbacks change. So they leave 2 of the 4 foundation walls to keep the setbacks, and then rebuild around those 2 foundation walls.
Okay. So that would be infill?
That would not infill. And then the last one is a renovation. So understanding the financing needs. Some clients will come to you and let you know that they've got everything they need all in a nice little bundle. And the cost of everything that they need to do will be managed by them. Others will tell you that they've got a certain amount of equity that they're prepared to spend on the property, but they need construction financing. And construction financing is different than having everything sitting in a nice little nest egg. Construction financing, going back a few years ago, RBC had a pretty good package for construction financing. And what they did was stagger the inspections. So as an appraiser, it was my job to go out and do an initial assessment of the property of what it was worth as land, and then what it would be worth as it was built off of the floor plans, assuming everything was done to a professional standard. And then the builder or the homeowner would call at different stages along the way and say, we're here, can you come out? We're here, can you come out? And I would be responsible to go out and let them know the progress of the construction, that it was being done in an orderly manner, and that the bank could release a further sum of money to get them from stage 1 to stage 2. at the end of it, when they're in the last 3%, at which point the bank would consider it finished, they'll release the final amount and roll all the construction financing into one mortgage. So initially it's a mortgage on the land and a mortgage on the construction. There's 3 stages of inspection for the construction financing. You get to 97% of completion, and they roll the whole thing into one tiny mortgage and release the rest of the funds to you.
Is that still available, David?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still available. Depending on how experienced the builder is, they may not choose to go with the traditional bank. The bank rates offer different penalties and are a little bit harder to get the money out of. Sometimes there's a little bit more flexibility in an equity mortgage or in private financing. The rates may not be as good, but you may be able to massage the inspection numbers a little bit, but that's something that should really be discussed with whoever's providing or setting up the mortgage for you. Understanding the cost of land, understanding the end value, whether it be a top-up, a rebuild, or an infill or new build, are all important. So when you're looking at a piece of property, you go down to Mimico, Toronto, Long Branch area, you'll see a lot of infill activities. Knowing what a 50-foot lot trades for and knowing what the 2 end products trade for are important. Is there a precedence in the neighborhood supporting your client's plans? And there's a strong neighborhood group that would make your client's project difficult. Again, if you go down to South Etobicoke, both are true. So getting severance on a 50-foot lot, there's precedent consistently throughout the neighborhood. I will tell you that 49.75 feet frontage in South Etobicoke is not a 50-foot lot. So it will be listed as a 50-foot lot. TREB will allow you to list it as a 50-foot lot. MPAC may say 50-foot lot, and you will get the survey and it will say 49.75, and you will need to get
Adjusted.
Yeah, you'd have to go through a date adjustment, which again, there's a precedent for it. It's just more difficult and it drags out the process. So understanding, what really needs to be done and what is allowable and not allowable. South Etobicoke has a very strong neighborhood group that protests any division and any severance of any lot. Aligning yourself or getting yourself familiar with certain builders in the area certainly helps in that regard, in knowing how to manage the hoops and how to manage the neighbors. So just become aware of your surroundings and get to know good quality people. Knowing the numbers. Construction is all about numbers. Every builder will know their cost to renovate and or build and will usually share it with pride. So builders are very prideful folk. They like you to know how good they are at what they do, and the lower their price to build, renovate, or in some cases rebuild, the better it is, assuming that the level of quality of finishes meet the neighborhood standard. So if you call a builder, if you call somebody who's good at renovations, they'll probably have solid numbers for you based on how many square feet you want to build or how many square feet you want to renovate, and they'll give you a pretty good range. Just divide that by the square footage, it'll give you your price per square foot, and you can apply that with pretty significant confidence to any project that your client wants to take on. It's been my experience that a renovation is somewhere between 125 to 150 a square foot, a build is 175 to 225 a square foot, a top-up is usually somewhere in the middle. If you go up to Lawrence Park, you can get a little lavish and you can work between 3 and 350 a square foot to build. But your costs on the front and the back are significantly higher as well. Be able to speak to the cost of land, the end value, with specific knowledge of the pocket. So bring sales. So when you're talking about putting an offer on a 50-foot lot or on any lot, because 30-foot lots down there trade the same way as land and they get rebuilt in the same manner. Bring apples to apples comparisons. Like, make sure that you know that 30s trade between this range and this range. 40s trade between this range and this range, but you can't sever a 40, you can only go semis. And 45 and up, 45 to 50 trade at this range because you can only build one house. 50 is traded this range because you can now build 2. And know your lot coverages. So, based on what you're buying and based on what's available, on a 30-foot lot, you may be able to build 60%. If it's 18,000 square feet, 60% of 18,000 would be your lot coverage allowances. If it's a flip, and this is a big one, and not a lot of agents think about it because they always assume that, and agents tend to assume that you're their agent for life. If it's a flip, and it's not going to be owner occupied, they're not going to be living in it, get a collateral agreement to protect yourself, and get it in writing, and get it for a long period of time.
Explain what you mean by a collateral agreement in this.
So if you give somebody the opportunity to buy a 50-foot lot, and you know that they're going to tear it down, go to committee, and rebuild 2 houses on that lot, and they're not going to live in either of them. There's going to be 4 sale signs in the lawn in 1.5 to 2 years. Get something in writing that says, upon successful completion of this sale, and upon completion of the 2 aforementioned dwellings in 2 years, I will be your listing agent at X amount per house.
You can do that.
You can do that.
That doesn't work.
And
So
do they have to?
they don't have to, but it will give you a stronger indication of whether or not you're going to be their agent for life. So they may say no, depending on what happens in 2 years, and depending on your success rate, and depending on a whole contingency of things. They may disagree. They may say, it's not going to be 2 years, it's going to be a 4-year project. I'm not prepared to sign a 4-year contract, which is fine. But there's no harm in asking.
And when would you present this to them?
I present it to them the minute we start shopping. The reality is you may find you've got a builder who, and I've got a builder in Etobicoke, and he's got 6 other agents working with him, and there's no loyalty to anybody. And it's the first person to bring in the listing gets the sale, and whoever gets the sale gets the listings on the back end. But there's no loyalty to anybody. And I need all of my information, I need all of my T's crossed and all of my I's dotted. And I got into a situation with them last year that cost me $1,200 after looking at permits, buying surveys, and getting everything crossed off, and it was 49.75, and he walked away. And I was out of pocket, and it was a learning experience, and at that point I evaluated my business and determined that that wasn't an avenue that I was prepared to travel in. So, you may get burned once or twice. I'm not going to tell you that it's foolproof. All I'm doing is suggesting certain tips and tricks to try to make your life a little bit easier when the time comes to put a sign in the yard. If they tell you that you're going to have the listing when they finish rebuilding, get it in writing. There's no harm in asking. But it's like everything else, get everything in writing.
There's no harm for you asking, but I guess there's nothing in it for them to sign it.
No, but the benefit to it is you're getting paid assuming that there's no kickbacks, because apparently buyer kickbacks have become more prominent in the industry lately. If there's no kickback, you're getting 2.5% on the buy. And you're getting 2 houses on the back end, right? So if you get 1.5 per house, you're doing okay. Because you're buying for 1, you're selling each for 1.2 to 1.3 after the fact. So your numbers make sense. But if he's asking you for a buyer kickback on the buy, because he's told you that he's going to give you both listings on the back end, and then he doesn't, or he's expecting you to list at 0.5% per house on the back end, then your kickback on the front that is money that's not his, is lost money, right? So you want to make sure that the work that you're putting in has value, and you're providing him your expertise, you're providing him your search, your time, you're showing him properties, or all of those things have value. So how much do you value your time? And when the time comes throughout the process, offer him your services. It shouldn't be here's what I'm going to do for you today, and here's what I'm going to do for you in 2 years. It's here's what I'm going to do for you today, and I'm going to keep an eye on the neighborhood, and I'm going to find you the highest sales every 2 or 3 months, and we'll do a tour of the neighborhood. And we'll look at the finishes, we'll look at the quality of lighting, we'll look at the flooring and the color patches that they're using. We'll look at the facades that are getting the best money. If Cedar Shake is the new go-to roofing, we'll know. It's not here's what I'm doing for you today, and here's what I'm gonna do for you in 2 years. It's an ongoing relationship that you wanna nurture. And those
Be
things,
involved, right?
yeah,
Be
those things
involved.
will keep you top of mind, and those things will protect you. I will say that builders are a giant pain in the ass, and they think that they can do what you do. So, finding someone who is mutually appreciative of the relationship is difficult at times, but when you do, it's a great relationship. And it can serve, 2, 3, 4 sales a year. So it might make sense to try and find somebody, get to know them while they're young and they're in that building phase, and stick with them. It's going to be a trust thing, but stick with them. Investing in condos. As I said, with the building of condos in the last 15 years.
By the way, going back to the builder,
Yeah.
how do you find the builder?
Finding them is difficult. There are industry communities in Toronto. Build comes to mind. There's a few other up at Leslie and York Mills. The Federal Rental of Ontario, FRPO, is up there, and there's another building developer assistant behind their office. It's not easy. Driving around, if you see a sign with the builder's name on it, write down the number, send them an email. They may be currently working with someone, but like everything else, as soon as they're disappointed, they may be looking for someone else. So, staying in touch and meeting new people isn't difficult if they want to be met. The other thing is just ask around your community. Does anybody know anybody who's doing a build? Facebook groups. Let them know that you're able to provide this kind of service, and that you provide a certain level of expertise in this service, and sometimes they'll find you.
I once met like a really awesome builder at in Mississauga, like North Haven Homes, and I just talked to him. I was shaking when I started talking to him, like, "Hi, just want to introduce myself. I'm a realtor, blah blah blah," and and
They
then
could be intimidating, really, like you said, they think they know everything.
So with builders, you really have to be able to provide value.
Yeah.
Like you can't candy code it. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to ask them what their finishes are. Ask them what their history is. If they're telling you that they're getting, as an example, flips in Toronto for 7 and selling for 1.1, well, do the math. If they're buying at 7 plus land transfer tax plus real estate fees, and they're spending $125 a square foot on 1,800 square feet to build, and then there's listing expenses and carrying costs, it's only making $35,000 a house. It doesn't make sense to align yourself with someone who's going to ask you to cut your commission because they can't manage their projects. Probably not. But if you see somebody or you recognize somebody from a neighborhood that is getting those high values, if you're riding your bike through the annex on the weekend and see a project, write down the name. Little Italy, Queen West. Find a neighborhood where you're getting people where there's an older, generally speaking, European facet, Bloor West, Roncy, Parkdale, and as that older community is leaving and the estate is coming in and selling them off, those are neighborhoods where builders are going in and finding houses that haven't been touched in 50 years and adding value to them. Investing in condos. So 18 years ago, we saw a bit of a swing. I get asked a lot if investing in condos is a good idea. I like it for the simple reason that Toronto right now is not really all that keen on building rental properties. So the condo market has privately supplemented the rental market for the last 15 years. So instead of finding neighborhoods like Quebec Avenue and High Park Avenue just north of Bloor, where they built a whole series of buildings in the 1960s and 1970s, Young and Eglinton was another area, they've stopped building high-density residential rentals. And as a result, you find a lot of investors buying these condos and renting them. And there seems to be a constant demand. There doesn't seem to be any shortfall in terms of finding a tenant in Toronto. Things to understand about condos is knowing how to explain a reserve fund and special assessment to your clients, both of which will affect your investor's bottom line. Understand the price per square foot rate of recent sales in the building, and what is the price per square foot rate of current rentals in the building. Both are important because both allow you to determine whether or not it is a break-even proposition or whether this investment is going to cost you $100 a month. And are there any limiting condo bylaws affecting rentals in the building? Generally speaking, long-term rentals are not frowned upon, but there has been, or there was, 8 to 10 years ago, a pretty quick reaction to Airbnb, and most condo bylaws didn't account for short-term rentals. Airbnb came in. A few condos were affected more significantly than others. City Place and Liberty Village come to mind, and the condo bylaws were changed pretty quickly to eliminate the possibility of short-term rentals. So what I would say is condo bylaws have changed. Find out what the current condo bylaws say about whether or not your building is allowable for rental, what the minimum rental is, and what the liability for the homeowner is, for your investor is. Analyzing the sale. So when you're looking at buildings, most condos are built in stacks with similar sized units above and below. So when you're looking at a tower, especially in Liberty Village, there's usually not a lot of deviation between the floor plan of 1101, 1201, 1301. It's just almost identical in almost every case. So when you're looking at a building as an investment for a client, historically look at the sales. Know what you're offering and know what they are. If you can identify that the different units are not trading at a similar rate or are reporting different square footages, the other way to sort through your numbers is to check the maintenance fees. So if you know the maintenance fees on the unit that's listed is $385, sort your list by maintenance fees and look at everything from $375 to $395 and figure out what's trading in that range. And at that point, you'll be able to get a better idea of what the true value of that investment is. Again, confirm with management or the status certificate what the allowances are for rentals. And if you're shopping in a small geographic area or limited buildings, start a spreadsheet. And this, I was telling you earlier about my investor who got into condos because he wanted a low maintenance type of investment. He actually called me 6 years ago and said, I'm coming into Toronto to meet with a real estate agent. I was on Facebook and noticed you're also a real estate agent. And I knew him from high school when I was like 15. I hadn't talked to him in 20, 25 years. Because I'm not making any promises, but I haven't signed anything with him. We're going out to look at properties on Saturday. Do you mind giving up your Sunday? And I'll make a decision Sunday night or Monday morning about who I'm going to work with. See what I can do, sure. So I got on my computer and I found 6 or 7 buildings with 6 or 7 condos at his price point. I found the sales, I put them in the spreadsheet, everything worked out. And then for every listing I had the lease amount. So as we were talking numbers and as we were breaking things down, I told him exactly what each unit that we were looking at or considering would rent for, within $50 up or down. This was on Sunday night. I don't think he got out of the car without telling me that the other guy just didn't hit any of the numbers that I hit for him. And within 3 days we had an offer on the table. And he's now at the point where he spends 6 months of his year out of country, and he'll call me and say, hey, I've got a little bit of equity here, go find me a condo. And he doesn't even need to see it. So I just send him my spreadsheets. He knows the condo's going to rent. He knows what the market's like. He doesn't care whether or not he sees it. Once he's ready to go, it's just a phone call.
Because you told him, right? So he trusts you.
So I'll show you, yeah. And then the other side of it is analyzing the lease, and the lease is the same way. It's not It can be affected by the price per square foot. There are ranges. The ranges are a lot smaller and harder to differentiate because there's not as much accuracy on leases in terms of square footage on listings. So what you'll find is a range. And then verify the lease terms. I had a lease last January where it was $3,800 a month for a condo on King Street, which seems insane. But my clients were happy because the person they brought in said, if we do a 2-year lease instead of a 1-year lease, we consider $3,600. And $3,600 still made them money. They bought it 15 years ago. So they looked at it and went, well, yeah, if I can get a 2-year lease, I don't have to relist every year. There's no down period, and I'm not giving an agent $3,800 every year. Then the numbers make more sense. So they took a longer lease at a less amount at a longer term. And we're happy with the results. Start a spreadsheet. You know, as much as it works for the sale, it works for the lease. So this is an example. I've got a condo listed right now at 1307 Sudbury Street. And this is what my clients and I go through. So when we started, we had sales 13 to 17. While we were talking listing and shopping, we had 13 to 7. And now we're looking at 7 and up as competing sales. Price per square foot on one, or square footage on one side, price per square foot, and in sheets on Google Docs, it's really easy. You just come to this cell, you type in equals, take your sale price, divide it by your square footage, and it just copies the equation from the top of the column to the bottom. The nice thing you can also do for them, if you'd like, is highlight similar sized or comparable sized units in red, and now you've got an idea of what the unit might sell for. So when you're talking to them and when you're looking at numbers, smaller units always sell for a higher price per square foot rate. There's actually a diminishing return on square footage. I don't know if that, does everybody know that?
No.
No.
Okay. So condos always sell, there's an entry level. Right now the entry level in Toronto seems to be about $450,000 for the cheapest cheap condo you can get. There's exceptions, but generally speaking, if you're looking at anything less than 15 years old, 450 is your entry level. As condos get bigger, the price per square foot goes down. So there's a diminishing return on additional square footage. So when you're looking at something from an investment perspective, my recommendation is always 750 square feet. It's a comfortable sized space where you've got, whether it's 1 bedroom plus a den, it's a very hardy 1 bedroom plus a den, or it's a 2 bedroom, you're going to find that it's a comfortable sized unit. Sudbury Street went through a bit of a hard time in 08-09 because there's a company on King Street where they put their heads on little white puffy animals, and he's gotten into real estate development. Anyway, Lamb.
I need more explanation.
Yes,
I
I
don't
do.
want anybody
Brad Lamb got into development.
Oh, yes.
And Brad Lamb was responsible for a lot of the buildings on Sudbury Street, and he sold them as unfinished lofts.
Oh.
But he took, I shouldn't say he, the industry went from a 1 bedroom being 650 to 750 square feet 20 years ago to, and the most recent 2 bedrooms at 36 Lisgar are 560 square feet.
2 bedroom.
2 bedroom, 2 bath, 560 square feet.
What can you do?
That's
Taking notes from Vancouver.
Yeah, it's probably about the size of this room. So picture 2 bedroom, 2 bath, living, kitchen, laundry in this space. So,
Okay.
yeah,
And
so
the upshot is,
there isn't. In my opinion, there really isn't. But when you're dealing with investors, the appeal of something like that is not going to appeal to a dual income young professional family. The appeal of something like that is 2 waitresses or 2 bartenders or whatever, but you're going to get 2 young quasi-professionals making entry-level money sharing the rent. To me, as someone who's working with someone who wants to maintain an investment, and part of maintaining an investment means not spending money on renovations and repairs every time the lease turns over, you want something that appeals to a more professional demographic.
Would that be like 1 plus 10, the mostly? 1 plus 10 is the most leased property, leased condo, or not?
It depends. In den has a wall short, because the den is situated in the middle of most floor plans, there's no window. So they've cut the wall off at the top, so the top 1.5 feet is exposed, and they put a door in, and there's really not a lot of privacy, but people are using them as second bedrooms. In City Place, the den is truly a den, and if it's a study, it's a little nook, similar to the little cutout in the door there. Some of the older buildings actually have a full room, so it depends on the den, and it depends on how well it's situated. Some agents will qualify a den as a bedroom. Generally speaking, a bedroom is equipped with a window and a closet.
And a door.
And
A lot of them, these days don't have doors.
David, have you had any experience with these condos as an executive rental? Like people that get relocated to the city and you furnish them and provide them with...
I've got experience with 2 of them, both on Church Street at King. Both buildings allow for it, but they allow for it, I think it's a minimum 3-month rental. Management can usually tell you what the minimal rental period would be for the building. They're not, it depends on the level of risk, and it depends on, from what I've found, who you're associated with. So if you're comfortable having it sit because you got it at an exquisite price, and you know it's okay if you miss a month because the previous 3 made up for it, it's not a bad option. You have to know people in good positions at good corporations who are bringing people in and need those type of opportunities, and you want to stay in very close connection with them. Their executive rentals are a little bit harder to find, and generally speaking, corporations aren't taking care of that the same way as they were 15, 20 years ago. It's now an introduction to a real estate agent who's going to put you in a condo on King Street for 2 years for $3,800 a month. So, you know, and those were the circumstances of that rental. So it really depends. If I was going to go that route personally, and I'm not there at this point in my investment life right now, I would look at a triplex. And that way you've got 2 other incomes offsetting, and you're going to get more appeal, especially in an area like Queen West, King West, Annex, Little Italy, where you can offer a main floor unit that's nice and well renovated, and if it sits vacant for a month, you've got 2 others to carry it. Does that make more sense?
Yep.
And David, are these cash flow positive units that in their newer buildings as well that this gentleman's purchasing?
So
I feel like things are kind of changing a little bit in the condo market in the sense that per square footage is up,
yeah,
and although rents are up as well, I mean, taking that into consideration with the maintenance fees that continue to increase
Right.
year over year.
so the same math applies as it does in smaller residential income units, where you've got to take your sale price minus your deposit, subtract your expenses, and then figure out or add your expenses and then figure out what your carrying costs are. It is possible to get a cash positive, although marginally cash positive, investment in a condo. Generally speaking, the average rent is about $2,000 a month, and you can get in at $460 to $500 with 20% down. Yes, so that's the caveat. In an investment property in Ontario, if it is a true investment property, your investor is not going to try and skirt the numbers. The second property is 20% down.
Yeah, you're not getting so essentially it covers that, but you're not getting a return of your investment.
So if but you are building 5 to 8% per year in equity, and somebody else is paying down your mortgage. So it's not an immediate return, but there is a return. If you're dealing with a young professional who's got 5% on a $500,000 condo and is happy living at home with mom and dad, but wants to get into the market now in hopes that in 3 years they'll be financially prepared to move out and have somebody pay for that property for the next 3 years, a condo will likely not carry with 5% down, even 10% down. But in that situation, having a conversation where it says, look, I can get you within $150 per month, and with that $150, you're getting a 5 to 8% return on the investment of $500,000, and somebody is going to be paying down your mortgage amount, So by the time you move in, you're going to have a lower mortgage, equity in the property, and in 5 years, you can take that equity out and invest it in a second property or a second condo, where hopefully between the two, you're now growing a portfolio, right? Because the equity can come out the minute you renew. So the benefit to being a professional is you want to associate yourself with mortgage lenders who are aware and able to pull equity out of properties to use as a down payment on the secondary property.
And that was my biggest concern, because you might be using, investors may be using line of credit or equity from another property for their down payment, right? So they have to account for that.
Yeah. Investors are a bit of a harder sell, but the one thing I would always recommend is, even if they don't go with your mortgage broker, introduce them to your mortgage broker. And depending on the relationship, your mortgage broker will call you quickly and say, look, it's a dumpster fire, stay the hell away from it. And it's really in your best interest to stay away from it. Because if you're a guy who can get financing for everybody else that you do deals with, can't get financing for your investor, it's probably not an investor that's going to make you a lot of money. Or it's going to be a lot of headaches getting closed, right? And you've got a very short window to do that. So get the numbers run by your mortgage broker and verify. Like if he says, look, I've got 6, 7, 8 properties. Can I have the addresses? Call the other agent. Because if they're working with you and they've got 6 other properties, they've walked away from other agents. Hey, I've got so-and-so. I've got him under contract. He's told me that, he wants to buy a property for this. How was your experience with him? And if they say, stay the hell away, the headaches were far beyond anything that made sense to me, and there's a reason I'm not working with him anymore, he's yours, you're welcome to him, it's probably a good sign that if the realtor's walking away from money, that it's probably not worth the headache for you. So, if he's telling you he's got if they're telling you they've got other properties, verify and find out why they're not using the other agents. There's nothing worse, and I say this having learned from a lot of mistakes, there's nothing worse than spending months and years and time investing in someone only to find out that either the deal wasn't worth it to begin with, or they always had somebody else in their back pocket that they were going to use, and they just wanted your expertise because the other person didn't have it.
And what's the best way for you to insist that they speak to your mortgage broker even though they have one of their own?
If they have one of their own, call theirs. Like if they're telling you that they've been pre-approved and their mortgage broker is...
You'd love to talk to him.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Do you mind if I have a conversation with them? I just need to protect myself professionally, and I need to know that when I walk into an offer, exactly what I'm walking in with. So if you're not going to talk to my guy, can I talk to your guy? And then find out if he's reputable. If it's his cousin Sal, cousin Sal may get things done. Cousin Sal may also not be alive to get things done when the deal closes. So just have a conversation. And realistically, it's all about creating a win-win. You want clients, they want investments, and there's properties out there. You're going to make a lot of money if you do it right. But you want to make sure that the people you're working with are people that are going to continue to add value to your life professionally and personally. You want to spend time with good people. So don't be afraid. And it's again, when you don't have a huge portfolio of clients and you're new to the business, or not new to the business, if you're just going through a bit of a drought where everyone's 6 months out, walking away from a client is really, really hard to do. I can tell you, having done it recently, it is one of the most rewarding things you will ever do. Only because it just lifts that burden of, we didn't get along, I knew it was going to be issues. Their expectation of the service that I provide and what I actually should have been providing were light years apart, and there was going to be nothing but headaches. So, if you've got 3 clients on the go, and a 4th one comes in and you just know they're going to dominate your time and take your energy and put you in a position where they're going to need you, night and day and at all hours on short notice, evaluate whether or not the other three people are worth compromising to make this one person happy. Anything else?
Can you repeat the calculation for to get a return on the investment? You said
To get-
500,000 property minus the down payment?
So $500,000 property
Minus down payment?
minus down payment of 20%
20%.
is $100,000, which puts you at a $400,000 mortgage.
Mortgage.
So $400,000 mortgage at current rates being $500 for every $100,000 borrowed, puts you at a mortgage of $2,000 a month. $500,000 condo is probably about 650 square feet at an average maintenance fee of 70 cents per square foot at the moment in downtown Toronto, puts you at $420 a month. Property taxes would be $2,100 a month, which is $175 on top of that. So your $500,000 condo would have to carry at $2,600 a month for a break-even proposition. A 650 square foot condo is probably renting for about $2,300 a month now, and was increasing between 6 and 8% over the last 5 years. So if they buy now and spend $150 a month, they'll be getting an additional equity increase of 6 to 8% per year on that $500,000.
Plus mortgage.
So that's the way it's explained. And it's, yeah,
Yeah, so the mortgage payment that they're making every month, would you put that in as equity build-up for the investor? Because every time you pay that mortgage, you're actually increasing your equity
right.
in addition to the expected increase that you're gonna get on the condo itself,
Right.
like on the property
So
appreciation.
technically it's a net loss, right? So depending on your accountant, you can look at it.
No, I know you're talking about the income.
Yeah,
I'm talking about when the investor is making that mortgage payment every month.
yeah.
If it's a blended payment,
Okay.
principal plus interest, I'm talking about the principal amount reducing the mortgage outstanding.
Yeah,
So that's essentially, that's a return. It's like an equity return, but you could actually say it is an annual return on your investment as well, because you're actually, with numbers, you're actually increasing your equity.
yeah. I would probably suggest you find a decent accountant who's going to be able to present it in such a way that you can't explain
Yeah,
and make sense to the government.
yeah. No, it has nothing to do with what you're declaring as income.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the actual principal
Yeah,
down payment of the mortgage.
yeah. I know what you're, to be honest, it's something that I leave to accountants because they're all different and some are ultra conservative. Like my dad's an accountant, I don't use it for my taxes. This just his approach to financing and taxes is ultra conservative in my opinion. But he's been doing it for a long time without any issues.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's got their own approach. In terms of what you're suggesting, I think I understand what you're saying, and yes, technically the buy down on the principal is an increase in equity.
Of course.
Right. But
That's a real number too.
it is. I think depending on how it's structured and whether or not whether or not it truly carries, there's also a bit of a net loss every month if you're.
Yeah.
So, you know, does it offset, or does one affect the other, or is it just?
That has to be
Yeah.
looked at individually for sure.
So,
Yeah.
you know, there's other things to factor in.
Yeah.
But with everything, all I can do is tell you what it's going to cost you or not cost you every month, and however you choose to present it to your accountant at year-end tax time is really between your accountant. That's beyond the scope of what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Anything else? It's my next vacation.
Yay.
All right. If anybody needs anything
That's a great spreadsheet. Do you want email this to your slides?
after I sell Sudbury, you can have it. The last thing I need is you walking with a client telling me what my house is worth. That's telling me what the house is worth. Sure. I can show the spreadsheets. Actually, they're dated now, but I've got spreadsheets. When I used to appraise, I've got spreadsheets for close to 40 condo buildings downtown.
Wow.
Yeah, and the square footages, the sales are dated, but the square footages wouldn't have changed. If you ever need anything condo related, I've got floor plans for probably close to 100 condos downtown.
Wow.
Like just boxes and boxes and files and files and
Great, thank you
you ever need a floor plan in, here. This is my database for PDF files for floor plans downtown. And then I've got 3 or 4 boxes, banker's boxes of other floor plans. So if you're ever actually investing in a condo, let me know. And if I have it, it makes breaking it down really, really easy. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good fun.